We're doing chapter 2 of Five People Who Died During Sex and 100 Other Terribly Tasteless Lists. Chapter 2 is called Love Hurts, and we're starting with 12 celebrity celibates. King Edward, the Confessor. Edward had no sexual relations at all with his wife Edith, a curious state of affairs known in theological terms as a chaste marriage, by which Edith came to be known as a virgin queen. There was some confusion whether Edward abstained for religious reasons or from his aversion to his wife, but tradition has it that it was the former, and Edward was duly made a saint in 1161. Some of Edith's compromises were less sure, or some of Edith's contemporaries were less sure of her virginity. Sir Isaac Newton, a lifelong bachelor and rigidly puritanical, he was said to have laughed just once in his life when someone asked him what use he saw in Euclid. He severed all relationships with a friend who once told him an off-color joke about a nun. Nikola Tesla, the Serbian-American scientist who invented AC power transmission and avoided all romantic entanglements, believing that sex was a drain on creativity. When asked by a reporter why he never married, Tesla replied, "I do not think you can name many great inventions that have been made by married men." Hans Christian Andersen, the fairy tale writer, made highly publicized declarations of love for a prominent, unattainable woman, including the Swedish nightingale, Jenny Lind. He also visited prostitutes, but he paid them just to sit and chat with him. He died unmarried and a virgin, so terrified of being buried alive that he left a written request that one of his main arteries be severed before he was placed in his coffin. J. M. Barrie, the creator of Peter Pan, the little boy who refused to grow up, was barely 5 feet tall, and always blamed his short stature for his lack of success with women. In 1894, however, while seriously ill, Barrie made a dramatic deathbed marriage proposal to Mary Ansell, a beautiful actress who starred in one of his plays. She accepted, but on their honeymoon, it became apparent that the recuperating Barrie had little interest in normal marital relations. The union was never consummated, meaning he never had kids. Lewis Carroll, a mathematics teacher, amateur photographer, and author of some of the great classics of children's literature, including Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Carroll, whose real name was Charles Dodgson, had no relationship at all with women, although at one point there was a talk of an affair with the leading actress of the day, Ellen Terry. She was dismissive of the story, and when asked to comment about her reported liaison with the author, she replied, "He was as fond of me as he could be of anyone over the age of 10. Edgar Degas, the French Impressionist painter and sculptor, spent long hours gazing at naked women getting in and out of bathtubs, but he was probably impotent. One day, a wealthy hostess asked him, "Why do you paint women so ugly, Monsieur Degas?" "Because," he replied, "because, madam, women in general are ugly." George Frederick Handel, the unmarried German-born English musician, gave away few clues about his private life. His royal patron, King George II, was one of many contemporaries who was kept guessing. When the king asked Handel why there was no Mrs. Handel, the great composer replied, "I have no time for anything but music." Handel did, however, have a sort of relationship with a close friend, a young German composer and singer, Johann Mattheson. One day at the opera, he and Mattheson had a spat over who should play the harpsichord. Handel refused to budge, and a fistfight broke out in the orchestra pit. Soren Kierkegaard, the solemn Danish philosopher, considered sexual relations as an abomination. My depression, he said, one of his latter movements, is the most faithful mistress I have ever known. When he was 24, however, he fell in love with a 14-year-old schoolgirl named Regine Olsen, and they were briefly engaged before he broke it off. Kierkegaard never really got over Regine, and over the years he tried to woo her back by bombarding her with his books of gloomy reflections. Although she never wrote back, he named her his sole beneficiary. Edward Lear, the Victorian polymath and nonsense poet, lived alone with his cat, writing limericks about men who he drew with long, unmistakably phallic noses. Lear's illustration for his limerick, The Old Man with a Nose, for example, shows a man poking his very long nose at three frightened children, possibly a reference to some sexually abusive childhood experience of his own. Throughout his adult life, he suffered from what he called the demon, or the morbid's epilepsy, a state of mind that he personally attributed to excessive masturbation. Henry Morton Stanley, the journalist and explorer, became a household name when New York Herald commissioned him to find Livingstone in Africa, which he did with the famous greeting, Dr. Livingstone, I presume. Stanley emerged from the nether regions of the darkest Africa to marry at the age of 49 the high society portrait painter Dorothy Tennant in a lavish wedding ceremony at Westminster Abbey. But on his wedding night, he informed his wife that he considered sex fit only for beasts. The marriage was never consummated. Mohandas Mahatma Gandhi, in his 30s and long since married with children, Gandhi surprised Mrs. Gandhi by taking a vow of celibacy, explaining that the total control over his vital fluids would enhance his spiritual powers and give him strength during his long fasts. His wife was even more surprised when in his 70s he employed a string of young women to massage him and sleep nude with him to test his celibacy. Not everyone understood, and he abandoned his nocturnal experiments when several of his followers resigned in disgust. 10 aphrodisiacs in AD 900. Ship's Island marinated in hot tea. Chinese emperors were required to keep 21 wives, a precise number thought to have magical properties, and the emperor was expected to make love to 10 of them every night. A Taoist manual advised that this could be made possible by applying the mixture to the imperial penis. 1400. Pigeon dung and snail excrement in England. In 1690, toad excrement in France. This method had the royal seal of approval, and it was successfully employed by King Louis XIV's mistress, Madame de Montespan. 1700. Menstrual blood as food or drink additive in Germany. 1830. Lion testicles or arsenic. Virtual poison in London. Cool. 1850. Penis and scrotum of a vanquished enemy warrior. Brazilian Cubio tribe. 1900. Live monkey brains, Malaysia. The live monkey was forced into a tight container with a bowl fitted to its head. The skull was then cut open and then peeled back to reveal the exposed brain, which was then scooped out with a spoon or sucked through a straw. 1943, animal hormone. In order to restore Adolf Hitler's impaired virility, his personal physician, Dr. Theodor Morell, injected the Fuhrer compound containing hormones from crushed animal genitalia. 1950, chili and other hot spices. These are banned as prison food in some South and Central American countries as they are feared likely to arouse passions unseemingly in a single sex environment. And in 2005, dolphins' testicles in Japan, chicken testicles are preferred in Taiwan. Great Balls of Fire, 40 syphilitics. Pope Alexander IV, Thomas Aquinas, Johann Sebastian Bach, Charles Baudelaire, Al Capone, Randolph Churchill, Emperor Commodius, Captain James Cook, Hernan Cortez, Frank Delius, Albrecht Dürer, Desiderius Erasmus, King Francis I of France, King Frederick the Great of Prussia, Paul Gauguin, King George I of Great Britain, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Francesco Goya, Heinrich Heine, King Henry VIII of England, King Herod of Judea, Adolf Hitler, Tsar Ivan the Terrible, Julius Caesar, John Keats, Pope Leo X, Ferdinand Magellan, Guy de Maupassant, John Milton, Edouard Monet, Benito Mussolini, Friedrich Nietzsche, Tsar Paul I, Arthur Schopenhauer, Franz Schubert, Jonathan Swift, Emperor Tiberius, Henry Toulouse Lautrec, Voltaire, and Oscar Wilde. And author's note: syphilis was long thought to have originated in the Americas and seems to have begun its spread around the world after Columbus's voyage in 1492. This disease may have been in Europe before Columbus, but it became commonplace after the arrival of new strains from the New World. First European epidemic broke out in 1494, spread in part by retreating French troops after the siege of Naples. Whatever its origins, the disease swept through the European population in the 16th century. At its peak in the 19th century, syphilis affected as much as 50% of the adult population in Europe and North America, but has largely died out since the development of penicillin in the 1940s. While it is impossible to retrospectively diagnose with complete accuracy, there is no evidence that syphilis affected everyone on the list. This old heart of mine, 10 horny senior citizens. King Louis XIV of France. The tiny Sun King was renowned for his phenomenal sexual appetite. His second wife and former mistress, Madame de Montespan, complained to her priest that she found the effort of making love to her 70-year-old husband twice a day very tiring. Victor Hugo, the French author of The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Les Miserables, required only 4 hours of sleep per night. Bad news for his wife, who was required to accommodate him 9 times on her wedding night alone. He had a 22-year-old girlfriend who, when he was 70, was still sexually active when he died at 83. His family tried to keep the frisky old poet from escaping onto the streets in search of prostitutes, but they were not entirely successful. His diary records that he had sex 4 times in the final 4 months of his life. Wow, what a horn dog. Empress Catherine the Great of Russia. She was both an insomniac and a nymphomaniac, which meant trouble for the dozens of handsome young soldiers, she continued to bed well into her late 60s. She had 21 official lovers, of whom the last, Platon Zubov, was 22 years old when they met. She was 64. Catherine's astonishing sex life, coupled with her ability to ride a horse like a man, considered shocking at the time when all women rode side saddle, gave rise to the myth that she had sex with a horse. Catherine's frolics were eventually terminated when she had a massive stroke and fell off her toilet seat in her 67th year. Thomas Hardy, the English poet, novelist, author of Far from the Maddening Crowd, The Tests of the De Umbrevilles, and Jude the Obscure, married his 35-year-old secretary, Florence Dugal, when he was 73. Hardy boasted to a friend that he was still capable of full sexual intercourse at the age of 84. W. B. Yeats. Success came to the poet late in his life, and he suddenly found himself surrounded by adoring young women. But he was also plagued with impotence and writer's block. In an effort to revive both his flagging and creative inspiration and his sex drive, he experimented with a number of quack impotence cures, including a vasectomy procedure known as Steinachen, performed by the Venetian doctor Eugene Steinach. 6 months later, Yeats got lucky with a beautiful young actress, Margot Rudock, 27 to 69, and the Dublin newspapers dubbed Yeats the grand old man of poetry. King Ludwig I of Bavaria, the grandfather of the Mad King Ludwig II, achieved international notoriety at the age of 61 by stepping out with a notorious courtesan, 28-year-old Lola Montez. She introduced herself to the elderly monarch by ripping open her bodice and revealing her breast. Ludwig pledged his undying love to Lola in reams of outstandingly bad verse, but was eventually forced by pressure from a popular uprising and his ministers to banish her from the country. Some suggest that she went willingly to escape another burst of the king's poetry. Lord Palmerston, in spite of his ill-fitting false teeth, Britain's prime minister was irresistible to women. During the Crimean War, Old Pam, or Lord Cupid, as he was known in Parliament, fathered 7 illegitimate children and once tried to rape one of Queen Victoria's ladies in waiting while he was visiting Windsor Castle. He later claimed he was drunk and entered the wrong bedroom. In 1862, age 79, he was cited as a correspondent in a divorce case. The story considerably enhanced his popularity, and it was rumored that Palmerston even encouraged gossip because he was hoping to call a general election. H. G. Wells, the author of The Time Machine, The Invisible Man, and War of the Worlds. Wells was an unlikely Lothario, being a short, fat, balding diabetic with an overly large head and a high-pitched, squeaky voice. But according to one lover of his body smelt of honey, which may have helped him have affairs into his 70s with women up to 40 years younger than himself. He was still at it until his death, a month before his 80th birthday. Mao Zedong, the communist leader that believed he could achieve longevity by increasing the number of his sexual partners, and well into his 70s was still shedding his drab military uniform to bed several young women at a time. Temporary bouts of impotence were treated with injection of ground deer antlers and a secret formula called H3. Bertrand Russell, a Nobel Prize winner and one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century. He had a string of high profile affairs with married women and enjoyed his fourth honeymoon at the age of 80. And despite a childhood accident that damaged his penis when he fell out of a moving carriage, on a lecture tour of America, the elderly philosopher was asked by a dean of a respectable girls' college, "Why did you give up philosophy?" Russell replied, "Because I discovered fucking." 10 milestones in contraception. 1300 BC. Egyptian women used pessaries made from crocodile dung. 900 BC. Chinese birth control experts advise women to swallow 16 tadpoles fried in quicksilver immediately after intercourse. Quicksilver is a poison, by the way. So, I mean, it makes sense. 200 BC. Arabians eat mashed pomegranate mixed with rock salt and alum. 1100. The Dominican Church advises women to spit 3 times in the frog of a mouth or to eat bees immediately after intercourse. 1400. Italians attempt to avoid pregnancy by drinking raw onion juice. 1600. The French swear by cabbage taken orally after intercourse. 1650. German women smear their private parts with tobacco juice. 1700. Islamic women are advised to jump backwards 7 or 9 times immediately after sex. 1750. Europeans wear condoms made from animal offal. The original condoms were made from sausage skins by slaughterhouse workers. Casanova, who hates using condoms, places faith in 3 gold balls purchased from a Genoese blacksmith for about $90, which he places inside his partner. Claims this method has served him well for 15 years. A more likely explanation for his run of luck is that he is infertile. Mr. Goodyear, in 1843, Mr. Goodyear vulcanizes rubber. The Japanese, however, continue to wear shoes made from leather or tortoiseshell. 10. Presidential picadillos, which means presidents that couldn't keep their prick in their pants. George Washington, 1789 to 1797, the original philanderer in chief. Among the women with whom Washington was known or suspected to have had adulterous relationships with were Kitty Green, Lucy Flucker Knox, Elizabeth Gates, Theodosia Prevost Burr, Kitty Dwyer, Phoebe Francois, Eliza Powell, Mrs. William Benningham, and Miss Perez Morton. Officially, Washington died of a chill that he caught, according to the official version, riding his horse in the snow. According to a more likely interpretation, he caught his death when he jumped out of the window, trouserless, after after an, after an assignation with an employee's wife at Mount Vernon. Thomas Jefferson, 1801 to 1809. He lectured his fellow men on the dangers of associating with women and the deprivation of morals and ambiguity of issue. But the effect was slightly undermined by the fact that he slept with slave girls. Jefferson had a 20-year sexual relationship with a slave called Sally Hemings, who was 30 years his junior. She bore him 6 children, who were also kept as slaves. Jefferson also had adulterous affairs with Elizabeth Walker, while her husband, General John Walker, was away fighting in one of the Indian Wars, and with Maria Causeway, wife of the famous English painter of miniatures, Richard Causeway. James Garfield, 1881. President Garfield said that his marriage to his wife, Lucretia, was a great mistake, and vowed to spend as much of his time as far away from her on business trips as he possibly could. In 1862, he was caught in an affair with an 18-year-old reporter for the New York Times, Lucia Calhoun. Mrs. Garfield made him choose between staying married and faithful or getting a divorce and damaging his career. Garfield chose the former, but during the 1880 election, the press reported his frequent visits to a New Orleans brothel. Grover Cleveland, 1885 to 89, and 1893 to 97. Cleveland was one of the very few presidents to enter the White House as a bachelor. In 1884, just as his first presidential campaign was getting underway, he was exposed to as a father of an illegitimate son by a 33-year-old widow, Miss Maria Crofts Halpin. His campaign team urged him to lie like a gentleman, but Cleveland ignored their advice and owned up. His supporters taunted throughout the campaign by the Republican chant, "Ma, Ma, where's my pa?" responded with "Gone in the White House." Ha ha ha! In the 1893 election. Cleveland's political enemies circulated a leaflet accusing him of bestiality, wife beating, and habitual immoralities with women. He was reelected with a healthy majority. Warren G. Harding, 1921 to 1923. Ruggedly handsome and immensely popular, Harding won the presidency by the biggest popular vote margin ever. He spent his time in office conducting random adulterous affairs, including a 15-year-old relationship with Miss Carrie Phillips, the wife of a friend. He began an affair with a 17-year-old Nan Britton when he was 53, passing her off in public as his niece. When she gave birth to his daughter, Harding tried to buy her silence by paying her $20,000 plus a monthly allowance. It didn't stop her from cashing in with the best-selling Kiss and Tell book published in 1927 that detailed clandestine trysts in seedy hotels in the Senate office building and once memorably in an Oval Office cupboard. Harding died suddenly at 57 on a speaking tour of Alaska. His last words were, "How do the bull seals control their excessive harms?" The news of seemingly robustly healthy Harding's death was in shock, and a rumor attributed to his death to be a sexually transmitted disease. It was also claimed that he had been poisoned by his wife Florence, possibly in revenge for 20 years of dedicated infidelity. This poisoning theory could neither be proven nor refuted, as Miss Harding pointedly refused to permit a post-mortem examination. It may have shed some light on another unconnected medical mystery. A White House doctor during the Harding administration once told a reporter that the president had 3 testicles. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1933 to 1945. Roosevelt lost the use of his legs after being paralyzed by polio in 1921. He lost the use of his wife's legs 3 years earlier when he found a pile of love letters linking him to her 22-year-old secretary, Lucy Page Mercer. Though Roosevelt promised to break off the relationship, but with his marriage effectively over, he lived more or less openly with his personal secretary, Margaret Missy Lehane, at his retreats in Florida and Warm Springs, Georgia. In 1945, the world was informed that the 63-year-old president had died of a brain hemorrhage while having his portrait painted by the artist Elizabeth Shoutmatoff, a friend of Lucy Page Mercer, with whom Roosevelt had renewed his affair and was spending the weekend. According to unconfirmed reports, he actually died of a heart attack during oral sex. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 1953 to 61. Ike had an affair with a 24-year-old Kay Summersby, who was assigned to be his driver during World War II, and later became his personal secretary. Eisenhower told his young mistress that he would divorce his wife and marry her as soon as the war was over, but he never followed through on his promise. And after the war, the two lovers never saw each other again. John F. Kennedy, 1961 and 1963. Kennedy is famously quoted as saying, Ich bin ein Berliner. Less famously, I am never thorough with a girl until I've had her three ways. Shafty, as he was known in his Navy days, enlisted White House staff to help organize the unending procession of women who participated in entertainments, including regular nude swimming parties in the presidential pool. Kennedy attributed his confident and relaxed, famous first live television debate with Richard Nixon to the fact that he had prepared by taking horizontal refreshment with a prostitute in a nearby hotel room minutes before the cameras began to roll. JFK was so pleased with the result that he decided to repeat the trick before all his TV debates. His technique was not, however, the stuff of legend, and he was by repute a quick and selfish lover. His efforts undermined by stress and recurring ill health. Actress Angie Dickinson said her fling with the president was the best 20 seconds of my life. Lyndon B. Johnson, 1963 to 69. The 36th U.S. president by reputation is a distant second in the White House adultery stakes behind the man he replaced. He was said to have the instincts of a Turkish sultan. LBJ was genuinely aggrieved that John F. Kennedy's reputation as a stud was greater than his, and complained to his friend, I've had more women by accident than he's had on purpose. The Philippine president Ferdinand Marcos was once informed by his wife Imelda that she was being groped by LBJ on the White House dance floor, and Marcos replied, Ignore it, Melody, it's for a good cause. William J. Clinton, 1993 to 2001. In 1992, a cabaret singer from Little Rock, Arkansas, Jennifer Flowers, became the first of many former lovers to kiss and tell when she revealed intimate details about her 12-year affair with Clinton in Penthouse magazine. Subsequent allegations of sexual misconduct included affairs with the wife of a judge, a sales clerk from Little Rock department store cosmetics counter, a prostitute, Bobby Ann Williams, who claimed Clinton fathered her child, and a former Miss Arkansas who alleged that her affair with Clinton ended with the offer of a $40,000 per year job if she kept quiet, and the offer of broken legs if she didn't. In 1994, Clinton's private parts went public when a typist from Arkansas claimed that the president had dropped his trouser and exposed himself to her at a Democratic Party conference. According to Paula Jones, the first phallus had a distinguishing characteristic. In 1998, Clinton became the second U.S. president to be impeached, accused of instructing a 24-year-old White House intern named Monica Lewinsky to lie under oath. He was tried in the Senate and found not guilty of the charges brought against him. He apologized to the nation and continued to have an unprecedented popular approval rating. Stuff of fairy tales. 10. Royal marriages. The Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible marries his first wife Anastasia, winner of the first Miss Russia contest. The Tsar's bride had been selected from the country's most beautiful women, or from the most beautiful maidens, who were summoned to the Kremlin and subjected to Samothracia, an intimate examination that was a cross between a beauty pageant and a customs body search. Ivan was consistently unlucky in love. The first of his eight wives died young. The second just 2 weeks after the wedding day. The death of his third wife, Martha, according to one account, was brought on by Ivan's excessively enthusiastic foreplay. His fourth wife, Anna, was married to him by proxy, but almost died of fright the prospect of meeting him, and had to be sent to a convent. When he found out that his seventh wife, Maria, had lied to him about her virginity when he married her, he had her drowned, and the following day his eighth and final wife, also named Maria, survived him. He died playing chess. King Frederick I of Prussia marries his mad in 1708. King Frederick I of Prussia marries his mad third wife, Sophia. The House of Hohenzollern, a royal family of Prussia and later of Germany, believes in a family ghost. According to the legend, a white lady will appear before the head of the household when it is time for him to die. One evening, the young wife charges in headfirst through the glass door to his bedroom and appears before him in her white nightgown, splattered in blood. Frederick took her for the family ghost and had a heart attack and died a few days later. In 1733, King Frederick II, the Great of Prussia, marries Princess Elizabeth Christine of Brunswick-Bayern. The wedding had been arranged by his psychopathic father, King Frederick William I, who suspects that his son is gay. Young Frederick is horrified by the prospect of marriage, threatens to commit suicide. But his father sends him a terse note to the effect of that suicide will not be necessary because if he doesn't do as he is told, he will be executed anyways. The couple could go their separate ways immediately after the wedding night. In 1745, Tsar Peter III of Russia marries the German Princess Catherine, later Empress Catherine the Great. Peter finds his collection of warfare toys a much bigger attraction than his new bride, and plays with his wooden soldiers, miniature cannons, and toy fortresses under the bedclothes, uh, taking up taking up the whole bed with war games, while his virgin wife lies undisturbed beside him. Catherine draws a line when he starts to rear hunting dogs in his bedroom, and she finds herself sharing their bed with 10 spaniels. History records that she opts for strangulation instead of marriage guidance. Catherine led a palace revolution in which her husband was deposed and then murdered. In 1765, Emperor Joseph II of Austria marries his second wife, Josephina. The emperor suffers from a skin complaint that makes her so physically repulsive to the emperor that he has a balcony connecting his room to hers sealed off. If I could put the tip of my finger on the tiniest point of her body that is not covered with boils, he noted, I would try to have children. There are no there are no children, nor is the marriage ever consummated. 1768, King Ferdinand I of Naples is married to Queen Caroline. When Ferdinand asked the morning after his wedding night how he likes his new bride, he replies, "She sleeps like the dead and sweats like a pig." In 1795, George, Prince of Wales, later King George IV, almost faints when he first lays eyes on his wife to be, Queen Caroline, or Princess Caroline of Brunswick Wolfenbüttel. The day before they are due to get married on their wedding night, he gets himself totally drunk in order to tolerate her personal nastiness long enough to sleep with her once. After which the two go their separate ways, never once attempting to disguise their mutual loathing. When Napoleon Bonaparte dies in 1821, a messenger rushes to inform the king, "Your Majesty, your greatest enemy is dead." "Is she? My God!" 1831, Emperor Ferdinand I of Austria marries 17-year-old Princess Maria Anna of Sardinia. Thanks to centuries of Habsburg royal inbreeding, Ferdinand is severely physically and mentally handicapped and is both epileptic and encephalitic. Encephalitic. His only recorded cohort remark on any subject was, "I am the emperor, and I want dumplings." During the wedding night alone, he had 5 epileptic attacks. There are no children. 1846, Queen Isabel II of Spain is pressured into marrying her first cousin Francis, the dwarfish homosexual Duke of Cadiz. Although Isabel makes it clear that she finds her new husband repulsive, on the day of the wedding, she gets blind drunk in order to face the ceremony. At the moment for when they are pronounced man and wife, they burst into tears simultaneously. When Isabel asks years later about her wedding night, she replies, "What can I say about a man who wore even more lace than I did?" In 1853, King Leopold II, King of the Belgians, marries Queen Marie Henrietta, a teenage Habsburg Duchess. Leopold is too ill to attend his own wedding and sends his brother-in-law, Archduke Charles, to stand in for him. Unfortunately for the sexually naive Marie Henrietta, who has gone to her wedding bed armed with only instructions to submit to her husband's wishes, Leopold sufficiently recovers to attend the honeymoon. "If God hears my prayer," she tells her friend after her wedding night, "I shall not go on living much longer." History's 10 least romantic honeymoons. Attila the Hun, 406 to 453. The king of the Huns, or the scourge of God to his friends, was a short, squat, and ugly. A Gothic historian described him as having a large head, swarthy complexion, small, deep-seated eyes, a flat nose, a few hairs in the place of a beard, and he was also a regular ladies' man who had a dozen beautiful wives. On his wedding night with his 12th, Eadrico, one of his arteries burst, and he died. Eva Braun, married to her boyfriend Adolf Hitler on April 29th, 1945, celebrated by swallowing poison the following day. The Fuhrer took his own life 2 minutes later. On Hitler's orders, both bodies were cremated with gasoline in the Reich Chancellery Garden. The wedding night of Cesare Borgia, a son of a 16th century Pope Alexander, was wrecked when a practical joker switched his regular medication for a bottle of laxative pills. At the age of 28, famous Victorian author and art critic John Ruskin married his cousin Effie Gray, but on his wedding night he found the sight of his bride's pubic hair so distressing that they never shared a bed again. They spent a sexless honeymoon in Venice, where Ruskin painted, took on notes on the local architecture, and mused on higher matters, such as the decline of the Venetian Empire. He later relented and promised to sleep with Effie again in 3 years' time, but he failed to keep his promise, and the marriage was annulled. George Albert Crossman and Ellie Sampson were married on January 1903, but on their wedding night had a marital tiff that resulted in the groom killing his bride by smashing her skull with a hammer. He hid the body in a tin box in an upstairs room in their home in Kensal Rise, London, where it remained for the next 15 months until a lodger complained about smells seeping into his room. When police closed in, Crossman slit his throat with a razor. John Harvey Kellogg, the inventor of the cereal, Kellogg's Corn Flakes, spent his wedding night with Ella Eaton writing Plain Facts for Old and Young, a 644-page treatise on evils of sexual intercourse. And this included a 97-page essay, Secret Vice, Solitary Vice or Self-Abuse, its symptoms and results, listing 39 telltale signs indicating someone was masturbating, including number 7, sleeplessness. Number 11, love of solitude. Number 13, unnatural boldness. Number 14, confusion of ideas. Number 28, use of tobacco. And number 30, acne. The marriage was never consummated. In August 1994, Minnesota newlywed Gregory McLeod broke his back while carrying his 280-pound bride Helen over the threshold to their home. The doctors described the 140-pound groom's injuries as being consistent with those of someone who had been crushed by a car. German bride Emmy Welts went to her wedding in Brisbane in September 1993, ignorant of the Australian tradition of smearing the wedding cake in the face of one spouse. When her new husband, Chad, rubbed a slice of wedding cake in her face during the reception, she responded by smashing a bottle over his head, killing him almost instantly. Japanese couple Saichi and Tomio Hidaki married in 1978. They did not get around to having sex for some time. The excitement of enjoying normal marital relations for the first time 14 years later was too much for them, and they both suffered fatal heart attacks. According to Princess Diana's biographer, Andrew Morton, as a special honeymoon treat, Prince Charles read her passages from the works of Carl Jung and Lawrence Vanderpoel. In Dedico Flagellto Morto, 5 people who died during sex. Felix Faure, 1841 to 1899. 6th President of the French Third Republic. On February 16, 1899, in the middle of the infamous Dreyfus crisis, Faure slipped away for a rendezvous with his mistress, Madame Steinhall, wife of the artist Adolphe Steinhall. Legend has it that Feure's bodyguards heard a scream and broke down the door to find him dead on a sofa with his beautiful mistress kneeling in front of him, a la Lewinsky. According to some reports, she was in a state of trauma-induced lockjaw, and his memory had to be removed surgically. Madame Steinhall was thereafter known as the Kiss of Death. Lord Palmerston, the British Prime Minister, 1855 to 58 and 1859 to 65. Old Pam, Britain's horniest Prime Minister, died in his 82nd year, officially from pneumonia after catching a chill while riding in his carriage. It was rumored, however, that he had in fact died of a heart attack while engaging in sex act with a young parlor maid on his billiard table. Cardinal Jean Danielou, in 1915 to 1974. The French have a phrase for orgasm, le petit mort, the little death. In 1974, the France woke to the news of one of their most respected senior churchmen, a world-leading Catholic theologian, the head of the theological faculty at Paris University, and the author of 14 books on sexual morality and the church discipline, had experienced Le Grand Mort when he dropped dead on the stairs of a brothel in Clichy, the red light district of Paris. The French police explained that the 72-year-old cardinal was on his way to comfort a 24-year-old blonde prostitute in an official capacity only. Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, 1908 to 1979. Multimillionaire grandson of the oil magnate John D. Rockefeller and 41st Vice President to Gerald Ford and Governor of New York, Rockefeller died in the saddle at the age of 71 while working on a late-night Saturday night project with his 27-year-old female research assistant. The unlucky researcher was pinned under her hefty boss's naked body for several minutes, till she eventually phoned the paramedics. The New York Times noted that the larger-than-life septuagenarian Rockefeller died the way he lived, with an enthusiasm for life in all its public and private passions. Pope John the 12th, 955 to 64, known as John the Bad. The Pope was bludgeoned to death with a hammer by an irate husband who caught His Holiness in bed with his wife. When news of the death reached Rome, it was noted that Pope John was lucky to have died in bed, even if it wasn't his own. And that is it for chapter 2. Please do like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next wonderful episode where we continue reading 5 People Who Died During Sex. I do readings of books every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So please do visit me then. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.